try and get out of here quickly. Okay, my name is Warren Adams, and I'm the Preservation Officer for the City of Miami. And what we're here to do tonight is try and explain the process of a relatively new concept we've got in the city, classed as a multiple property designation. It's a thematic designation. Now, it was in the past that there were two ways to designate historic properties. Either individually, where you would designate sites individually, or as a district. When we designated as a district, every property that was within that district was subject to review by either staff or the Preservation Board if they wanted to do any alterations or repairs to the property. This new method that we have now is called a multiple property designation. And basically what that means is we identify properties throughout a geographical area that have a common theme. So we'll explain tonight about the first proposal we have for using this method of designation. Basically what it means is we identify the properties with a common theme. They all fall within a certain time period, and they all fall within a certain geographical area. So while we have all these properties, and there is technically a district boundary for the thematically related properties, only those properties are subject to review. So if you have a property next door to one of these thematically designated properties, you're not subject to review. It's only the individual properties that have a common theme running through them. So we're going to get started. I'll just introduce a couple of people. First is Evangelos, who's one of the preservation planners for the City of Miami. And we have Wendy who's preservation planner for the city. And we have Raphael Suarez, who is the assistant city attorney. I'm one of the assistant city attorneys. And I assist the board. And he's also assists the historic president of the Environmental Preservation Board. So we'll get started. If you can please keep your questions to the end, because we've found out a lot that when people ask questions, it's actually going to be covered in the presentation. So can you please just hold your questions to the end, let us get through the presentation, note your questions down, because you'll probably find as the presentation goes on that some of your questions will be answered. Thank you.
Thank you everybody for coming out tonight. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to go Village West. This is what we identified as the area, the geographic location of where we're going to be focusing on these structures. Why is it significant? This community has been over 100 years old. The neighborhood illustrates the incomparable legacy of the Bahamian and Southern African American community. We have identified approximately 50 residences that qualify for designation as historic resources. We'll go in a little bit later as to what qualifies that column. Third one is we're focusing on wood frame vernacular residences that were built between the 1890s through the 1940s. Okay, and this is just a highlight of where some of these buildings are located. This is also about the history of the community and contributes to the significance of telling the story. Evangelos Street is historically, that was the name, it's been called Charles Avenue. That's where the original community was set up. UWF Straw House built a bunch of houses and shopping houses. There are still some on that street. One of the houses on the street is the Mariah house. The top photo is a historic photo that's on the right-hand side. The bottom is the current photo. This property, located at 3298 Charles Avenue, was built about 1890, and it's on the local register of historic places. The UWF Straw House, that's next, two houses down, a few houses down actually, 3224 Charles Avenue. This one was built circa 1897. This too is on the register of historic sites. We have here the photographs. The one on the left is the historic photograph. The one on the right, as I'm sure you're aware, it's being in the process of being restored, and that's its current condition. We also have the Burroughs house, 3250 Charles Avenue. This was circa 1932 was when it was built. This on the left is a photo of her, and she did work like everybody else for the Monroes. I believe, I have to confirm this, but I believe the property she built the house on was left to her by the Monroe family. But I will confirm that. Okay, so what is historic preservation? This is a quote from the National Trust. Through historic preservation, we look at history in different ways, ask different questions of the past, and learn new things about our history and ourselves. Historic preservation is an important way for us to transmit our understanding of the past to future generations. Essentially, the way I interpret that is these buildings are a physical manifestation of history. They tell a story. And this particular story that they're telling is the contributions of the Bahamian and Southern African American community to the development of Coconut Grove. And it's telling them through these unique structures, wood frame vernacular, that you really don't see a collection like this. So it's kind of exciting. Okay, why historic preservation? These are two structures that have been demolished. So you do historic preservation not just to prevent demolition, but in order to preserve these structures. At the same time, it provides a sense of community, and it also helps to tell the story. So as you walk through these different streets, even though they're not all together, you still can see the development of the community. Okay, this right now, this is the map. In the red is the properties that we have deemed as being qualified as historic resources. What we mean by qualifying is these buildings, when you have a historic district, you have contributing and non-contributing buildings. A contributing building is one that is largely intact and it doesn't need a lot of alterations. And if it does need alterations, there are minor alterations. That may be that, and in some cases, not necessarily with these structures, but in some cases the windows are not historically accurate. That type of alterations. What we haven't included is what would be considered a non-contributing structure. Non-contributing structures are located within historic districts. These are structures that don't tell part of the story. They're not over 50 years old, and so we don't include them. But because they're within a historic district, we would still have purview over them. Our board would decide what the new construction is going to be. So that's why we didn't do it with this area. This area we're focusing specifically on the wood frame vernacular. So as Warren mentioned, your next door neighbor, they tear their house down, they want to build something, they don't require a review by our board. Criteria for designation. Chapter 23 of the City Code of Ordinances has different criteria. You have to, these are what we use to explain why this is significant. Okay, and we have to identify that 3 different criteria. Exemplifies the historical, cultural, political, economical, or social trends of the community. These structures help to tell the story of the Bahamian community and then the Southern African American community, South African American community. The second one is to portray the environment in an era of history characterized by one or more distinctive architectural styles. This particular style, wood frame vernacular, is a distinctive architectural style. And we have historic photographs, and you can see a lot of these were all over the area, and they have subsequently been torn down. This property right here, this is the one on the left, is the historic photograph. The one on the right is its current condition. And as you can tell, there's been very few modifications to the structure. And then finally, the 5th one is embody those distinguishing characteristics of an architectural style or period or method of construction. Again, the criteria is satisfied with the fact that these are all wood frame vernacular, they all are from the particular time period, and they all have a similar method of construction. Okay, so what is wood frame vernacular? To define it, this is what we have in our historic design guidelines, which we publish and put them online, and we have them also if you're ever interested, you can send us an email. The first one is it's a simple wood frame building, which is the product of the builder's construction experience, available resources at the time, and the surrounding environment. Essentially what that means is partly the building's constructor, there may not have been an architect involved. It essentially is grabbing the resources and building it and using local resources. Typically rectangular, a balloon frame construction, and rest on piers. They typically are 1 or 2 stories in height with 1-story front porches and gabled or hip roofs with overhanging eaves. 4 is horizontal weatherboard or drop siding are the most common exterior wall materials. We have identified that in some of these there are wood frame vernacular, but they actually were originally covered with stucco. So those particular properties we have also included because that's how they were historically done. Next one is some early buildings feature vertical board and batten siding or wood shingles, while asbestos shingles are common to post-1930s construction. Majority of these houses before 1930s, they had wood shingles. And so what we would do in historic preservation is, what's comparable is a 3-tab asphalt shingle. So it has the same appearance. And then the next one is wood double-hung sash windows are typical. When you drive through the neighborhoods and you drive through these houses, a lot of them have their original windows. And you can also see they just go up and down because they're not large window openings. And then the last one is ornamentation is sparse, but may include shingles, corner boards, porch columns, brackets, rafter tails, vents in the gable ends, and elliptic limestone detail. Okay, what's the designation process? How does this work? Okay, we go out as staff, and we go out, we survey. But what that means is that we literally drive down street by street by street, and we take photographs of these structures, we take notes, and we create survey forms. And typically, when you are working on a district, you drive down and you know every single structure, whether it's going to be contributing or not. In this particular circumstance, we drove down the street, we looked at what properties potentially could be identified. We went back, we did more research to limit it down, because there actually are some that appear to be wood frame and they're actually concrete block. So we didn't include those because it wouldn't fit the criteria. So we initially did that, and then we went out, took more photographs, went back out. We went out multiple times to make sure we got angles, we got all the right information, and we could evaluate them. The next step is to start conducting research. We have started conducting research in order to determine who's living in these houses, what is the story behind these houses. The next one is we have community meetings with residents and property owners of subject properties. Today, I know we do have some property owners out here. We also have members of the community. So we had a meeting on Saturday, and we had a meeting today. Preliminary designation is presented to the Historic and Environmental Preservation Board. What this document does is essentially, it's not very detailed yet, because it's not the final, but essentially what we do is it goes to our board decides, does it meet the criteria, is there enough of a significance for it to move to the next step. So our board decides to deny it, to approve it. If they approve it, they direct city staff to move forward. We have 120 days from when the preliminary designation is passed. Depending on how the calendar falls and when our board meetings are, that could either be 2 months or 3 months. Next, public can make statements of support or opposition of the designation. We do take that into consideration. We receive, you can send me, if you do support or do not support this, you can send me an email, so we include it as part of the public record. We ask that, in some instances it's easy for us if you include your address, so then we can identify who the property owners are and who the community members are. The next one is the board may deny the preliminary, or they may direct us to proceed forward with the final designation report. At that point, if they approve, move forward, we have further community meetings. So that way more people can become aware of it. We can answer more questions. And then it also gives people more of an opportunity to say whether they support or object to the project. Final designation report is submitted to a HEP meeting where the board approves or denies the final designation. At that point, 15 days from there, there's a 15-day window where an aggrieved party can file an appeal to City Commission. Okay, what does designation mean? Designation means for one, I just want to say up front, it doesn't mean that all of the work has to automatically be done the minute you're designated. The idea is that you take it back slowly from the process. Like I said, most of these houses are actually intact. Most of these houses you would be able to do asphalt shingle, single hung windows, that's what we've noticed was historically there. So it's not much different than what is currently there. So the first one is all alterations, restorations, rehabilitations, and new construction are in compliance with the Preservation Office Historic Design Guidelines and the Secretary of the Interior Standards. The Secretary of the Interior Standards is what we all follow. There's multiple ones. For instance, there's just the general ones, and then they create standards for more detail. So, for instance, if you wanted to maintain your original windows, they have the steps and the recommendations on how to take care of that. Okay, in this particular, because it is a multiple property designation, only the properties, those that were circled in red, would be subject to these guidelines. Next, property owners can make recommendations. We have, for guidelines for the subject of multiple property designation as it pertains to fences, hedges, paint colors, driveways, and walkways. These guidelines are submitted then to and approved by the board. What this means is that we work with our homeowners associations, so Buena Vista East, Morningside, Bayside, even Mino. We work with them in order to determine what they find is appropriate. So it types of fences, hedges, all that type of details. But when it comes to the structure itself, we're bound to the historic design guidelines and the Secretary of Interior standards. And then finally, the scope of work requiring approval in accordance with the guidelines and standards is limited to the exterior of your structure and anything that is visible from the public right-of-way. So what that means is windows at the back of the house, you can close them, you could use windows that you wouldn't necessarily be historically appropriate, and we'd still be able to sign off on that. Okay, historic preservation incentives. The ad valorem tax exemption program. Warren, can you speak more to that because you're familiar with that?
Yeah. Basically, the way the ad valorem tax exemption program works, it's, as its name implies, it's actually a tax exemption for appropriate alterations to historic properties. So basically how it works is if you have a property worth $100,000 and you do significant work to it that's appropriate for the building that's been approved by the Preservation Board, which can include plumbing, electrics, an addition, and new siding, new windows, and then at the end of that work your property is worth $300,000. Well, for up to 10 years, the increase in value of $200,000, you'll be exempt from paying the increase in ad valorem taxes for that $200,000. And that's there as an incentive for people to repair and reuse their historic properties. So we have that program already running in the city at the moment.
Do you want to talk also to zoning variances?
One of the other things that we can offer is we recognise that sometimes when you have a historic property, there may be certain code requirements and certain zoning requirements that you have to conform to. Now, if you have a historic property, in some cases we can make exceptions to these requirements. And one of the best examples is if you have a historic property and you want to build an addition because the house is maybe too small for you, we have the ability to reduce your required setbacks to allow you to get the size of addition that you want. And again, this is to encourage the reuse of the historic property and allow it to be adapted, allow it to be enlarged, and so that it meets your requirements and so that you're encouraged to keep a historic building rather than build something new.
Okay, then the third one we're going to do, we're talking about, we'll be done soon. The third one is grants for restoration and rehabilitation. As of right now, we do have the Arts and Public Places program that was put into effect. 10% of the money they collect goes to historic preservation. So what we do at that point is the mechanism has set up, we're still working on the process. Essentially, people will be able to apply to these grants. We will review them. They will actually go to our board as well as the Arts and Public Places Board. And then that will be decided and it's provided. These grants are for people who are living paycheck to paycheck, people who can't afford to replace the roofs that they're required to. So they would be essentially more need-based. And then the second one is we're in the process of creating, we're looking at, has not been established yet, but we are looking at different avenues to create a preservation fund that would allow for additional grants and resources. Again, this one is still in the planning phase and has not passed yet. Okay, now do we have questions? Yes?
Okay, so you mentioned that you wouldn't be taxed on the improvements of these properties, but what about the additions that you spoke of? If you were to add
If that's pre-approved, you can get the tax exemption from that as well. Now, by pre-approved, I mean that the Historic and Environmental Preservation Board have approved it as an appropriate addition, which generally means it's sort of in the back. You can't really see it. It doesn't dominate the historic structure. So, yes, if they're pre-approved, you can get them for that.
Yes?
Okay. Are these grants for homeowners, are they free for that?
It's not a payback. No, you don't pay back. It's a grant.
Okay.
So for instance, it would be like for a roof. You know,
Okay.
you guys can't afford it. The wood shingle roof, you'd have to provide information showing that you can't afford it,
Okay.
and then it would go from there. And it would be a review process. Yes?
Hi, it's just this homes, or is it extended to buildings and structures as well?
This particular program is just for residences.
Just
Okay, but the grant program that you're asking about,
Right.
it would be available for it's not just for these, it's historic preservation in general. So we have other neighborhoods where people can only afford shingle roofs, but to be historically accurate, they have to put tile roof. So the idea is that the grant would kick in to make up the difference
Okay,
on those properties. And it's specifically designated properties.
okay,
Okay, so not just, thank you for that, not just any historic property, it has to be designated.
okay. So how can we make sure that the some of these structures are, because some churches are also falling into this as well.
Okay, I can talk to you more later about that.
Okay.
Because there's a little different criteria when it comes to churches.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
The preservation fund that you mentioned is not developed yet. How long would that take for it to be in effect?
Yeah.
For people who don't have.
Exactly. We are actually, I believe he's probably running late from traffic. He would be able to speak more onto that. But I know there is a discussion, and I know there's Jeremy. So I will get more information for you on that once and hopefully he's here, and then once he gets here, he can answer more on that. Yes.
Have 50 residents already been notified?
We are in the process of doing that.
So they're not aware of this?
We
going on?
go through this established community meetings. So according to the code, we're correct.
Per the code, they have to be notified.
How many
Prior
have been
to-
notified? Thank you, that's a great question.
Okay, they have to be notified for preliminary evaluation, which means the board will consider whether to go forward or not.
But
Not final. For preliminary, that was your question? That was your question.
Well, my real question is, were they informed about these two meetings? The Saturday meeting and this meeting? Are there many of them here?
No. Only
Well,
Mr.
are
there any of
Simpson.
them?
These are posted. But I don't know how you
Only Mr. Simpson.
notify. Let me answer that question. I don't know how you
It's
notify about this.
for the code. We don't notify these property owners, but I do know, Cynthia, can you speak to that? Are we
Normally in that office.
the?
Let me just
The
answer your.
office did send out
Right.
the notices.
Yeah, because the workshop meetings don't really fall under
That's
the,
all, yeah, we did.
but here, prior to the preliminary evaluation, 10 days, at least 10 days prior, the owner has to receive written notice, and before the final, there's a much more extensive notice that involves 4 kinds of noticing. So 10 days before preliminary consideration to the owner by mail, and before final, including, again, another mail notice, 3 other kinds of notice before that hearing. The workshops, I can't speak to, others will have to speak to how they were.
We advertise on, like we do for other designations. We pass out flyers, it's posted to the Facebook, social media. I know Cynthia also is at the churches handing out flyers.
Yeah, I did do that.
We are?
Did you
No, I did do
You
that.
did do that, okay.
But were the flyers put on the doors of each of the residents?
Right, what sense was outreach done?
Okay, and also it's just been confirmed that we are in the process of trying to work on a 3rd meeting. Yes.
So the process about compliance to zoning and building codes, and what process in this will the head board get involved early on and then coordinate with the building department, or how is that? Because
When it comes to the waivers, it goes before our board, so like what he was saying about the setbacks, that you would go, like let's say you are doing the addition. Well, at the same time, any new projects goes by our zoning department, so they review it to identify if certain waivers are going to be required.
they have, I know in properties like this, between building and zoning, code, 4 points inspection, insurance, there's a lot of hurdles to get through an old structure that way. So will there be a system in place that will allow us to maybe go through a process where the building and zoning is upfront directed? Because by the time you do plans and all, you don't even know where to start, because you have to do things being held to this code, that's today's code, and most of these homes are not going to be held to that standard, or can't even be done to that standard. Is there a process we can work together with the building department early on?
Well, if you're gonna go in front of the head board to get an approval, you should do preliminaries and get the head board approval prior to commencing on a full set of building drawings. Because of the cost that you're gonna acquire by getting the plans. If you're restoring it to its present historic, its present condition, you're not gonna need to comply with like windows, etc. Electrical, MEPs, you are.
So when do we get that response? So you don't go to the architect and have them redesign something that's not going to work. Like you put impact windows
Well, when you present preliminary drawings to planning and zoning, get it approved by the head board, and then begin your design drawings, your construction drawings,
Right.
and submit them to the building department.
But again,
So you give incomplete plans to planning and zoning board, so we do that?
Well, no, you would give,
architectural is only.
you'll give architectural with elevations on what you're gonna design, what's gonna be built, and that's how zoning and historic will approve them based on the approval from the board.
Yeah, so I've been through this process, just curious, that once you get the head board to approve or not approve, then you know you're talking about a historical renovation process, right? So I think it'd be good at that point in time, before you engage MEPs and structural, to be able to sit with the building department and say, because an architect and engineer is gonna go with the code, they're not gonna be able to do anything less than code, just submit. So at what point?
You could sit with us,
Okay, that's what I was
but
thinking.
understand that we have nothing to evaluate in front of us. Okay? So,
If an architect comes in and wants to go to show the present condition of the property to our structural engineers or any of our staff members, MEPs or building, and show what he's proposing to do construction, we will review and give comments.
I think that would be a good upfront process. with
Like a
that board.
pre-construction, like.
Pre-construction.
it's like up to the architect to come in, sit
Right.
with us, make an appointment, sit with us, and we'll go over them.
To do his proper due diligence.
And we all, for larger projects or most projects, we always recommend people at least come and speak to us first and let us know what they're proposing to do. And then we may even have some ideas as to have you thought about this, have you thought about that, and then potentially we could do this to see if possible.
Okay.
Which in larger scale commercial historic projects, which is typically a couple architects who do that type of structural restorations, we do sit in a lot of pre-meetings on what they're proposing to do and how they're proposing to comply. It's done at a larger scale.
Okay, thanks.
Can you move them?
Not once it goes before the board.
So you can't move different site in,
No, once the designation goes in, the board is the one, we have to request from the board to relocate it. We can't approve it at the staff level.
Can you move it out of City of Miami?
Again, I
It
can't
would
speak to that.
lose its historic designation under the city of Miami code if it was not in the city limits, because this is the city of Miami, not,
So
Medley.
if it designated historical property, it can no longer be moved?
You
or
can-
decide?
You can apply to the Historic and Environmental Preservation Board for their approval to relocate it. If you do that at staff level, you would have to go to the board.
But do we have to get your approval before we go there, or just?
No, you just-
No, it's been done. The Dade County Schoolhouse was moved by a developer to the park, where it's now at, the first schoolhouse. So it's been done, it has happened, and there's other instances I can't think of, but it's not common,
But
scenario.
who decides on that?
The Historic Preservation Board.
Historic and Environmental Preservation Board.
19 of the homes on this list are homesteaded. 2 are religious exemptions. 2 are religious exemptions. None of the other 17 people knew about Saturday's meeting or today's meeting. And they're really upset because they don't know that their houses can't be sold, torn down, maybe they can't get homeowners insurance. I want to thank the building director and Maurice Pont, and the assistant building director, for being here tonight, because I think Andy, you, and Guillermo de la Paz touched on some really important issues about straps and roofs and tie beams and putting in impact windows into wood frame homes. This is very upsetting. Mr. Simpson was the only person there the other day that owned one of these homes, or 2 or multiple on this list. And why do we continue to have these workshops? We had several over the NCDs and nothing, and now we're having this. There's no preparation. It's really disgusting, because as an advocate for the community, I spent my whole day Saturday and Sunday consoling people, trying to help people figure out what was going to happen to their properties. And there's a lot of houses that aren't on the list. And there's even a house on the list that's been torn down for over a year. And Maurice, I was on that 3678 William house. It's crazy. I mean, why don't you guys do your homework before you bring people out? I mean, it's embarrassing.
Are any of the people you spoke with here tonight?
No, they're not. Because, once again, because of the way we continue to treat people of color, they don't feel like they have any say-so. So why would they come? It's continuous over here. It's ridiculous. And then when you have a house that's been torn torn down for a year
One of
on
the-
the list? How did that happen?
One of the reasons that we are doing this is a number of people have spoken to us about the contribution of the Bahamian community and the sort of African American community from the southern states has never been recognised. It has never been respected.
It's true.
It has never been protected. And so this is the first step in us hoping to do that. And at the same time, hopefully offering them the financial resources to retain
But if you offer
and
them-
repair and keep these historic properties in place.
But we can only do
So
that if we tell them.
and we are working on that, and we have acknowledged that we have to, as we said on Saturday when we were at the meeting, we have acknowledged that there are other notification procedures that we have to follow,
Everybody doesn't have
which we
email.
are going to do. But doing it between Saturday and today hasn't really given us enough time. But we have taken these
So then we
comments.
should have called out.
We have
So we
taken.
don't need to have meetings until we're prepared.
We have taken these comments on board, and we are going to address them as we said on Saturday.
But we've already done this once before, we're doing it again.
We did it on Saturday.
No, but we did the workshops and we haven't, you're agreeing with me, we've accomplished nothing. We're wasting y'all's time too.
Well, we like to think of it as we're reaching out to the community, we're trying to improve our process, and we're trying to address the concerns of the community who feel that their history isn't respected, that the history is being lost, that the lots and the residences
How many
are
people are
being
here that have
overdeveloped.
a stake in this, that are saying, I mean, it's disgusting.
Well, I would like to ask how many people from the community would actually like to see us protecting and respecting and restoring their history.
Elvis, you're not part of the community.
No, but you're,
Elvis, you're not part of the community.
Who's expensive?
Excuse me.
I'm not saying that I don't want that to happen, but let's do it in the proper fashion. Let's do it right. Let's get it right. Show the people the respect they deserve for once.
They don't want to keep the property. What you say that you're going to keep the.
Well, that would be good to say that we want the property in that condition when it was there, keeping it alive.
Next question? Yes.
Yes,
Sir, Shahrani was actually up.
okay.
Sorry, we'll get to you.
Get to it.
I really appreciate anything you do for historic preservation. Really do. I've been working on this since like 2006. It's hard. It's very, very difficult. But what I'm not sure that, I mean, I see these homes being torn down already and developers coming in before
What
this
year
is passed.
your house was built? What year your house was built? You live in
38.
1938. Is it a wood frame house?
I've lived here longer than you,
I
okay?
understand, but you have no stake in.
I certainly do. It's my neighborhood.
But it's somebody else's property. It's private rights.
Let me finish.
Go ahead.
I see them being torn down immediately because of this coming through. I know this is Ken Russell's initiative, but why isn't it for the whole grove? Why is it just for the West Grove? There are a lot of historic places all over the grove that we're trying to preserve, and we're getting nowhere. Nowhere. So I think this should apply to everyone. My neighborhood has historic homes. We have bomb shelters and homes down my street that were built back when Kennedy was gone. And the other issue that I think is really important is insurance. Since I have an older home, I used to have citizens insurance. And I can no longer get it anymore because every time the code changes, you have to upgrade your house to the next code. And they want so much money, and I have to pay all the money to fix my house. My house isn't going anywhere. It's been there since '38. All the storms. But the insurance companies don't care about that. And I feel like if you're going to get these people involved in this, with getting their homes fixed, they're going to have insurance. Where are they going to get it?
Yes.
Yes. We need to see what you're saying. See what I'm saying? And that is to say this,
if you say you care and you cannot put in place a moratorium on zoning changes and demolitions in this community, you really demonstrate you don't care at all. And Kathy found 19, but I went through the list and I found 4 that are homesteaded, 2 that are questionable, and 44 that are owned by developers waiting for demolition by neglect. So what are you going to do about that? Are there grants that are going to be given out to everyone that owns one of these homes? The developers who own most of them. So if you do care, a moratorium on demolition and no more zoning changes. If you care, we need to see a demonstration. We need to see what you're saying, because you're saying one thing and we're seeing something altogether different. So the director should be here tonight.
Yeah. The building director's here and says the assistant building director.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay.
Andy.
And so if you are here to endorse what they're saying and help us to believe that what they're saying has some validity to it, then that's what needs to be done. And Mr. Garcia should be here tonight. He certainly should. So if you say you care, we need to see that you care. Don't just say you care. We need to see that you care. And with all the demolition permits that you're issuing for this community, you say we want to preserve the community, but we're issuing 20 demolition permits a week or whatever. You're really not demonstrating that your speech is valid at all. We need to know you're trustworthy.
Noted. Yes, sir.
On a little different angle, if these homes are worth being preserved, and we have the building official here to help us, the questions I would have, and by the way, I brought in a model of it was done by Elizabeth Plater-Zybert's students and Richard Shepard 15 years ago. And it shows a regular single frame shotgun with an addition on it that makes it twice as big and makes it a livable house. So in a way, the 4 that are owner occupied might be the test cases for making this program show what it can do to actually help the owners that are still like the 4, maybe not the developers that are waiting to tear theirs down. But 2 questions for Mr. Pons. One is the 50% rule would that no longer apply? The 50% rule says if you improve your property by a certain amount, then you have to bring it all up to code. Would that be waived for an historic property or not?
The 50% rule, yes.
It would be waived
For what is existing.
for what is existing.
Yes.
Is that based on the assessed value, or what's it based on? The
That's
value?
on the improvement value, right?
It has a designation.
No,
Because, wait, Bert, because what would happen is, because the value of the structures, let's just say most of the structures we're talking about, if you look at the tax code, they might be assessed at $25,000, and the land might be assessed at $250,000 to $300,000. So you're automatically, as soon as you do any improvements, you're over the 50% rule.
When you change your roof, you will be already over the 50%.
So that's what I'm saying, would it be waived so that you wouldn't have to bring the plumbing, the electrical, everything up to code?
If it is existing and you do a total remodeling, yes, you now might have to reinforce the whole structure, because the structure was required because it was built in the first codes of the 1920s, even before the city had code. But yes, the MEPs, the plumbing, the mechanical, the electrical will have to be brought.
Okay, that brings me to the second part of my question is, and I think Marcelo was talking about, let's just say we have an owner, not a developer, who's got one of these wood frame houses, and they don't have the money to hire an architect or a mechanical engineer or an electrical engineer can they come down to the, or have someone come for them to the city and say, when you come and look at my house before it's designated and tell me, 1, whether it's salvageable, and 2, will you, then I can go to the preservation board and say, where am I going to get the money to say a new roof and new plumbing if it needs that? Would the building department work at the very early stage to say, this house is salvageable, not salvageable, it's going to take estimated $50,000 to fix it instead of $20,000? How does a homeowner doesn't have any wherewithal except the ownership of their house? How are they going to do this?
Unfortunately, that is, the owner will have to bring in a design professional and do an evaluation, possibly exact amount of work that you're gonna need to do and put a price on it. That'll be something that'll have to be done by the architect, by a contractor.
So I think, Cynthia, then that's one of the big holes in this, especially for, like I say, I'm not worried about the developers, they can find their own money, but the ones, the four, at least the four that Mr. Armbruster said are owner occupied, that'd be great to get those four done, and there's a plan right there there's a model right there that shows how it can be done.
I have a comment, but just because a structure is designated doesn't necessarily mean that a process kicks in that you have to do something, is that correct? Correct. So your property can be designated, but it doesn't mean, okay, now you're on notice, you have to do A, B, C, and D.
But his question is valid. If you have a $25,000 assessment.
But it doesn't say, just because your property is designated, it doesn't now require you to do anything with it.
Correct, but a $13,000 renovation would pay.
I'm not disputing that. I want to clarify for people that it doesn't mean you have to kick it in here. Oh, sorry. Chris. DHD. I'm a state heritage trust.
To most of those properties, Mr. Ponte, the county appraisal has it valued at $45,000, $45,000.
A lot of them, yeah.
That's the number that we're gonna look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dolly, go ahead.
I'm Dolly McIntyre, also with Dane Heritage Trust. To address your question about a moratorium, once the process is started, a moratorium automatically goes in place. Once it starts, not once it's ended and designated or not. Once the process starts, a hold is put on demolition.
A hold is actually put on all permits.
If it's designated.
No.
Just more of these properties. Just more of these properties.
Correct.
There's just to clarify for your information, not to get legalistic, it's what's known as an interim protection measure, which means from when the board considers it until 120 days have passed, or the board decides, there cannot be a demolition for that time period. So 120 days from when the board considers it preliminarily, and the board either has to decide yay or nay, yes or no, or 120 days passes and then it's over. So that's what I believe the process you were alluding to is.
Yes. Oh, I believe he's first up here.
Let me mention some of the points I made on Saturday. Number one, if this is a serious process, you would have contacted the owners first. A number of these owners don't even live here in the state. So talking about giving out flyers and emails is not relevant. My mother's been running our properties for many years. She's 93. She doesn't use Facebook. So the point is that, to me, is irrelevant. That's point one. Point two, I said about the accuracy of your survey. You started with the first house, my great-grandfather's house. You have the wrong address.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, well, the point is that suggests a certain amount of seriousness. That's the most historically significant house. It's the one we're currently renovating. And the idea that you can do this quickly and in terms of with architects and engineers is totally false, because it's taken us years to get through that process of the windows and all of the changes that were suggested to be up to code on one hand and to be historically significant on the second hand. Next point being that, again, if you're talking to people, a lot of these people are own single properties, and that's what they have. So if they need a roof, it's $15,000. They need the electrical, it's $25,000, $28,000. The point is, you're going to mandate they can't knock the house down, they can't do anything else to it, and you're not going to be able to provide these funds, and you're just jacking them. It's daylight robbery, because at the end they're going to be forced out of these properties, and then the developers, the speculators are going to be back there again. Now, to talk about the significance of these houses and the Bahamian culture, if you go on any of the City of Miami websites, especially one about Coke and Grove, there's not one mention of any Bahamian there. My great-grandfather came to this neighborhood in 1888, and he built his house in 1897, and the point is, at one point, when I was in the 60s, when I was a young guy, we had over 45 of these houses. And the city then was saying, oh, knock these houses down, we need brick houses, blah, blah, blah. So the point is now that it seems to be cool to say, we want to preserve these houses without having the funds in place to make sure that these very expensive alterations are done, then it doesn't seem to me to be, to be that serious. And by the way, when this city was incorporated in 1897, 30% of the signatories were black. They were given the vote for 1 day. And then they were disenfranchised the next day. My great-grandfather refused to sign. Says not going to be given the vote for 1 day. The largest number of people in this area, when Miami was chartered, were the Seminole Indians. The second largest number were the blacks, and the third largest number were the whites. So the thing is, if this is a serious endeavor, and if you want to act in good faith, you need to come into the next meeting saying you have contacted all of the owners. By the way, someone mentioned it. This list isn't complete. We have some houses that aren't on this list, fortunately. Maybe you'll be running around with a camera to find them. The point is, it doesn't seem like the effort and the seriousness and the sincerity is put into this endeavor at this point. So to me, until you contact all of the owners and let them know that their property is in potential jeopardy, if this thing goes through and they don't have the money, then what's going to happen?
Well, first of all, as we said, we do appreciate that we need to go a bit forward to contact the owners. Secondly, these repairs are going to cost what they cost regardless of whether your property is designated or not. The difference is when it's designated, there'll be funding there to help with the costs of the repairs. Maybe. The funding is well...
Is it?
Yes or no?
Is the funding there? What do you mean? Maybe.
They add a lot of tax incentives.
No. You need cash in your hand to fix your room, to do the plumbing, and to hire architects. It's not about tax in the future.
First of all, you don't necessarily need an architect to repair your roof. And secondly, if your roof needs repaired, then is there any funding for it at the moment without designation?
Well, the people may decide not to use the type of windows you want to use the type of shingles, to do it the way that they might want to do it, that you may not agree with.
Well, what we are saying is the way that we would approve it at the moment is probably the cheapest option possible.
I doubt that.
You doubt what asphalt shingles are not the cheapest?
Well, no, I'm saying we have 70 houses in this community.
Metal frame.
No, I mean we're repairing houses every day.
Metal frame impact windows aren't the cheapest.
That's what you get in the brochure. But the point is, we're out there doing this every day.
And those aren't the cheapest.
We just put a new roof on a house 3 days ago.
What did you put on the roof?
This wasn't one of these wooden houses, but the point is that we know what these costs are. And as far as actually going through the process of getting all approvals, we certainly had to do that at 3242, not 3224.
But again, that was a major restoration.
Correct.
Very little of
Correct. But I'm saying we have had to go through that. I know how long it took.
Because it was a major, did you not raise the house as well? Was it not put in new foundations?
Correct.
So that's a major project.
So the people have their one little house, and they're up in North Carolina, and you're coming to say that this is going to be the program, that you have to make these improvements. Have to.
No, we don't tell anyone they have to make improvements.
Okay, so if they say, I want to just deal with my house as it is and leave it that way, count me out of the program. That's not what was said on Saturday. Is that the case?
No, at no point have we said people have to make
Okay, so if people say, I don't want to have anything to do with that, go and fix the other houses the way you want, that will be acceptable? Is that what you're saying?
That would be up to the historics and environmental preservation.
Again, so they could overrule and say, you have to do this. That's the point I'm making.
The list that you have there at the moment, we appreciate that list may change. There may be some houses not included on that list because when we researched them, they've been altered beyond what we felt would be reasonable for people to take back should they choose to do so. So some houses are specifically left off that list. And this is for the preliminary evaluation, so that list may very well change when it comes to final evaluation. If someone has a property that they really do not think should be in that list, they can contact
Well,
us.
since most of the pictures you used here are properties that we own, that my family owns right now, have for the last 80 years or more. So I'm saying, the process is one thing, but the facts on the ground are a different thing. So, first of all, you need to contact all of the owners formally with a registered letter that you know they got it. That's thing one. To do anything. The second thing is to clearly state, if we want to say that you have to do this and make certain changes this way with the roofs and whatnot, these funds are available for people who can afford it, maybe some kind of loan. For people who can't afford it, that we're going to give a grant. But if it's not, if that's not going to be done, then it sounds like you're just, you know, sounds like a fast one, so to speak.
Well, as I said, we don't tell anyone to do anything with their property. It's choice. If someone's property needs repaired, it's their choice whether they do it or not.
Okay, so again, last time, if the owners of these houses say they want to opt out, don't want to have anything to do with that on the individual houses, that's fine. Is that correct?
Make the case to the preservation board.
No, but you see, no, it's a simple question. Can they say that I don't want to be a part of the program? Or does the preservation board have the right to say you must make these changes?
Yes.
Simple question.
The preservation board can, yes.
Pardon me?
The preservation board can say yes, you're part of the program, and they have a right of appeal to city commission.
Well, and you've started the process without even contacting all the owners of the house?
We've not started the process yet. This is purely an informational.
We've had 2 meetings. The process has started.
Informational meetings. The process for the preliminary evaluation has not yet started.
Okay.
Okay. I think it's very important. I've been following this carefully with Commissioner Russell, not only this, but also the NCD changes. And the reason why we're all here is because we're not happy with the current code of NCD and the enforcement. That's the fact. And this process that Commissioner Russell started is good for everybody because the way it is the law today, a lot of things can happen. People can demo these homes today, right? They shouldn't be able to with the waiver process. They shouldn't be able to with the NCD overlay, but they are doing that. So right now, I think they acknowledge an error on Saturday that they should have been contacting the 50 people. Absolutely. And they said they will correct that before it's done. Now today, if you want to demolish your home, you will have to put a waiver in. And it's going to go to the historical board to see, look, you have a 1910 structure. You can't just demolish it because you want to. It's got to go through a process.
Well, what's the process that has allowed these block houses to be thrown up when the zoning does not
The
call?
lack of enforcement of NCD, you're absolutely right. The lack of enforcement.
Well,
because if NCD was enforced the way it was written way back when, we probably wouldn't be
If
here
it woulda,
right now.
coulda. But they are there and they're being built
Don't you think
every
this
day.
process is going in the right direction? It's trying to do something.
You asking me?
Yes.
I think it is going in a direction. I think the people who own the properties should be a part of the process
Agreed,
from
and
the
they're gonna do
beginning.
that.
So you can't determine the direction until you deal with the owners of the
And
properties.
they're going to do that. And that's what they said they're
Going
do.
to.
Yes, but that's why these workshops are here. Wait, you don't want to shut this workshop down.
But the owners aren't here.
No, exactly.
The workshop without the owners having
This is a
the
workshop that
opportunity.
asks if it wants even to go forward. If we don't want it to go forward, it's not right here. But it's not us. It's not these 70 people here to decide. It's a process that, if this process didn't start, there would be no grant or no
Why
funding.
did it start without actual?
You don't know there's going to be a
They
grant.
made that distinction already.
All right, I'm going to bring it back this way. So we acknowledged there was a notification issue. We've all said that. But between Saturday and today, we couldn't cancel it because people would still come out. It'd be unfair for the people who knew they were coming out. So we're already decided we're going to have at least one more meeting this month where we are purposely going to notify the exact homeowners and the exact property owners.
So basically,
How are we gonna do that?
18 days to notify people they have another meeting this month. Why do we rush things? I don't understand.
What's the
If
rush?
If you go tomorrow, put the stuff in the mail, it takes 2 or 3 or 4 days to go to North Carolina. And people may not be able to make it in the next meeting in 2 weeks. Why are we rushing?
What's the rush?
Well, the rush is that,
Yep.
as you know, shotguns are on the extinction list, like the Cape Sparrow. If you don't want to save any of the wooden structures, all you have to do is wait for a couple more years and let the few.
So you're going to
and
extremes.
Mr. Simpson knows some of the owners
Sure.
who will keep theirs, but a bunch of them, though, especially the ones that are being bought by developers, they are going to be knocked down. So if the community, and I'm talking about the people who live in this community, really don't care if the wood structures get knocked down, then I think you have a very valid point that this may be stillborn. But if on the other hand, the community does want to save some of these historic structures, the HEP is trying to come up with a method, a program that will allow people to get some money and hopefully work with the building department, and you've got 2 of the top officials here, so that a new process can be evolved that will save some of these structures. Not all of them,
Good, start with the money. Show me the money. Start with the money that will be.
You gotta start somewhere. You gotta start
No. Where I went to school, they always say start with the money. If the money.
Developers say that for sure. I can knock this down and have a.
No. Because most of the people who own the houses are owning individuals. They are the speculators, but a lot of people own the house, they own one house.
Right.
And therefore, they have to make these things, these changes, they have to get an architect, they have to do all of that. Okay.
Can we stop 1 minute? I like Mr.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm Elvis Cruz. I live in the Morningside neighborhood. It has been a historic district since December 20th of 1984. And over those 34 years, I can tell you it's the best thing that ever happened to my neighborhood. I do live in a historically contributing house. It's been very interesting to stand here and listen to the different opinions. I've seen this movie before. Every time a historic district is proposed, the same things get said. I happened to be at the demonstration to try to save the New Yorker back in the early 80s. I had the pleasure of being out there that night with Barbara Baer Kapperman and Leonard Horowitz when we tried to save this building. This photograph is from a mural at the Wolfson Initiative in downtown Miami at the college there. The protest sign. Art Deco is ugly. New is beautiful. I don't have to tell anybody in this room how successful that historic designations were for South Beach. My neighborhood, Morningside, early 80s, I proposed to the city, please make my neighborhood a historic district. People in my neighborhood, these houses aren't worth saving. There's nothing here. Some of them are made out of beach sand. I would have to tell you, our property values are insane now. My friends can't afford to buy into my neighborhood. The MIMO Historic District, many of you may be familiar with that up on Biscayne Boulevard. When that was proposed in early 2006, people were saying, what are you, crazy? You want to save those hooker motels? What are you guys, nuts? Look at it today. It's the best thing that ever happened to Biscayne Boulevard. You are very fortunate here today if your value system includes preserving the legacy and the history and the culture of Coconut Grove. If that is not your value system, you're still going to do well, because I've seen this movie before, and there's three main reasons to be in favor of historic preservation. One, architecture. You happen to like the type of architecture and feel it should be preserved. Two, history, culture, legacy, social culture, social history, whatever you want to call it. Maybe you call it nostalgia, maybe you call it sentimentality, but the fact is there is an enormous amount of collective and individual history involved in these structures. And the third reason to be in favor of it is money. Those of you that own historic properties, you will make money. I've seen it time and again. I've seen it denied time and again before the historic designations were placed. Mine was a perfect example. There were people screaming up and down, we're never going to be able to make any money. You want to put a 35-foot height limit on us? We're going to go bankrupt. You're crazy. This is going to kill all development on the boulevard. Some of that was said by historic preservationists. Andre knows the one. But it happened, and it's been wonderful. You're very fortunate today in that historic preservation usually begins from the bottom up. You are so lucky that here, the city is recommending it. The city is wanting to do it. We complain about the city, and believe me, sir, I am one of the city's worst critics. These people can tell you. People like this guy can tell you. I have over 165 appearances that I've logged in at City Hall, railing against what's going on, speaking truth to power, and often they ignore the truth. So here, Alice in Wonderland, through the looking glass, the city is trying to do a great thing to preserve our history.
In your opinion?
They're not, in my opinion. Although I think it's empirical, but yes, in my opinion. And yet, hang on, let me finish. Let me finish. I will not interrupt you when you speak, I promise. The city is wanting to do a very good thing. Are they perfect? Believe me, they're not perfect. Yes, they should have sent out the letters beforehand. We don't have to rub their nose in it anymore. Let me dispel a couple myths. You do not have to do anything to your house if it is designated historic. You're not obligated to change a thing. If you do decide to do something to your house, then yes. Then you would go to the city and say, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And if it's something fairly simple, paint, windows, the roof, they can approve that administratively at no cost. For a while, they were charging for that simple administrative approval, and I am the guy who went down to the city and said, what are you, crazy? You're going to charge people for that? And they took it away.
And how many houses
There's
did
no
you
cost.
do?
Hang on, let me finish. One. My
One?
own. And I've done a lot with it. I'm not in it for the money, I'm in it for love.
I'm
So
saying,
if
but
you
it's
want-
one house.
Let me finish.
Yeah,
Let me finish.
you've got the floor.
It's a great thing. You don't see it right now because it's a baby and you're only looking at the diaper. Trust me, the baby will grow to be beautiful. It's a wonderful thing. You're not familiar with it. You're suspicious of it. I've seen the movie before and it ends well.
Your movie was funded. This neighborhood had the highest black ownership in the United States of America during the 60s. 175 families have been moved out because different things have happened. So your movie is not the movie here. It's not the Coconut Grove West, what you want to call it.
It has
movie.
never happened here before.
Correct. And what has happened...
I take it back. It has happened here before. Right across the street. In Coral Gables.
You're saying across the street. Coral Gables is right here. You're talking about across the street. When they wouldn't call this area, which was part of Coral Gables, they said you have to call it something else. Call it Golden Gate. The other thing is that when you talk about all of this is funding, whether you want to get a loan to fix up the house and whatnot, you did not have any mortgages in this community until the middle 50s. My parents got the first black mortgage in Dade County in 1953. So that movie you're talking about, maybe your grandfather or whatever, is not the movie here. It is not the reality here. It is not the history here. So speak from whence you know, which is wherever you live. Your one house.
I've been listening to you all night long, and I can't understand if you're in favor of preserving your history or not.
That's very presumptuous for you to make a silly statement like that. Whether I'm in favor,
Please, let's chill.
Well, I'm in favor of preserving your history.
No, good. My history. You know my history?
In general, I do.
Oh, in general. What's your history? What's your background?
Hey, we're getting off topic.
That's relevant. You say you know my history. What's your history?
I didn't say I know your history.
That's what you just said 10 seconds ago.
I said I know in general. I know the
in
history of
general.
the area.
Then speak of what you know. Speak of what you know.
Okay, children.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so my name's Al Crespo. I came here tonight because I heard about the meeting on Saturday and I asked one question, was it recorded? And I was told no. So I bought my camera because I'm constantly amazed why this city continues to have meetings like this without there being any record of this meeting. If I didn't have this here, you all could pull out guns and shoot each other and walk out the door and everybody said, I don't know what happened, there's no record. You know, so that's a real problem to begin with. Workshop, meeting, whatever you want to call it. The city's rich enough to have a cameraman here with a camera and a microphone there to record these meetings because you need to have a record of this. Now to Elvis. Elvis, back about 7 years ago, when you were out there fighting that preservation fight, I went by your house and took pictures of that house of yours with a scaffold on the side and filed 3 code violations of code enforcement against you for the shoddy way that you were keeping your house up. And you got served with code violations. So for a guy who talks about being on top of things, you didn't have a good house 5, 6 years ago. You had scaffolding on the side, you had weeds, you had that Volkswagen bus out there parked in front. Right, you know, so for you to be presumptuous enough to come over here in another part of the city and talk about your views about this is bullshit.
Okay, excuse me,
You know?
we're getting off track again.
It's bullshit.
Al, the scaffolding was there because I was working on the house.
Yeah.
Why didn't you come to my house tonight after the meeting?
I drove by there today.
Okay,
I actually drove by there right now.
Excuse me,
It looked
we're getting
fine.
off point. We're getting off point.
And at the end of the
Okay, we're asking questions.
Children.
Can we go? Yes, you got a question.
I'm actually a owner of one of the houses, and I happened to be here because my wife read the newspaper and I saw there was something going on. So I said, let me go and see. And from the pictures I've seen, I think my house has a red circle around it. I just happened to find out now. I wish I knew before. It's just like, oh, news. All right. And I'm trying to figure out if being part of this preservation designation, is it a plus or minus? Is it a good thing or a burden? It's hard to find out. Now, I was thinking, okay, you were talking about grants and things like this, that's nice, but grant means future. What about some better idea that if your house is designated, then you'll be tax-free. You don't pay taxes for the house. That's like immediate, that's much better. Because otherwise, I don't have an incentive to reject or put in the trash the letters I receive every week about people wanting to buy my house, developers. So, okay, I can preserve it, and I want to preserve it, because I like Coconut Grove. That's where I live too. I don't live in that house, but I live in Coconut Grove. And I've been having this house for 15 or 20 years. And I'm happy the people living there are happy. They're African-American families, and I'm very happy with them. They're happy with me. We're like family. But in order for me to preserve the house, if I think financially, I'm thinking, well, maybe I should sell it now because it has value now. And if suddenly there's a preservation board that says you can't do this, you can't do that, then nobody, and you cannot demolish, then, you know, financially, I'm going to sell it tomorrow. Because what's the incentive for me? There's no more. I mean, I'm happy about the grove and the palm trees, but hey, you know, life is not only about that. You have to financially answer some questions. So if, I mean, a good incentive would be, okay, you want to keep your house, it's preservation, no more taxes. I mean, real estate tax, you know? That would be immediate and good. Otherwise, I'm still thinking, so I don't know if it's a burden or not. I hope I'll find out soon.
Thank you for your comment.
Wrong meeting.
Next question?
Yes. Good evening. I'd like to say to all of you that my name is Leona Louise Baker, and I think I've said this before at one of the meetings. I live just west of Harvard School in that section called the Golden Gates. We, my homeowners group is called Lower B. Walker, and we were very fortunate enough to get the district just north called the McFarland. That was declared historic in 1991, and we have been placed on the National Register. But I'd also like to say that it wasn't an easy task. There were a lot of reasons why some of the residents thought it shouldn't be, but in order for us to preserve the history over there, for many of the same reasons that we're going through what I'm hearing tonight. So I'd like to say to you, I'm a part of whatever's going to happen because I like to see what's going to happen to Charles Avenue. I have a special love for that street because it's the oldest. Be very sure when you talk about preserving and some of the houses that I have looked at, and I remember having seen some of them, maybe, just maybe, you don't always want to talk about restoring them. There's a thing called replicas too. It's to be considered. Now all of you may say she's crazy, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But consider that too in some of the restorations or some of the houses on, especially Charles Avenue. Replicas can be done and you save a lot of money. Why am I saying that? Because we have experienced some things with 3 of our houses over on this side in that park. We've got to go back and make sure some things are happening that shouldn't have happened. And maybe it won't happen, but just think about it. Replicas are not all bad. And I'm for everything you're talking about here tonight. We went through a lot of the same things with some of our residents. But I am very proud to say that that section just north is on the historic register, also on the national register.
Next question?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
It is obvious to me what is taking place here, and I would just like to read something that I wrote. Okay, I realize there's a lot of development in Grand and Douglas that's going on, and this is to preserve some of the wooded structure. So what I wrote is called an entree party, and it's a budget of about $8 million. Includes where it was Cox property, which is vacant property out there, for empty lots in Washington, Wisconsin. Grand Avenue, the architectural plans have been completed. I heard Ms. Williams speak on that at one of the meetings. The concerns are that they don't exceed 5 to 8 stories. Douglas Road 3750 has been designated historical, if you're going through that registry. Structures need to be renovated, and I am really awed by what you have done here. The village house is closed. You have to contact the GL. Holder. The Ace Theater projections were at $2 million. They are at 20 right now, and they have been offered 47, which they will not do. Like I said, the four houses, Kings Way is another area. Originally, it was built to house blacks. I would really like to read this out loud. Originally, it was built to house blacks. What happened? The laborers had educated their children, and along with the influx of others from historically black colleges, they found Kings Way. It became a well-known middle to upper middle class area along with the Golden Gate, a southern Coral Gables area, and a majority of mulatto. The educators worked in Miami, and the Coconut Grove community, they were the majority from Coconut Grove. They were the director of human resources, school superintendent, principals, and Olympic medalists. All were descendants and origins from the Kings Way. The name Kings Way should remain a keepsake. It is obvious to me what is taking place here, what I'm doing. And on the agenda, since I know this, affordable housing, that fire college,
We all pay attention, please.
Coconut Grove Playhouse seating. Now this might stir up a little, I know that they might, but we have two options, and with what I'm hearing in this room, what they have spoken, I know that there are only two options. And the Coconut Grove Playhouse has seating for 300 to 700 seating. It could include Marcellus Hall being rebuilt if they really, if it doesn't get in state hands. I'm really perturbed by that. I would like it to remain the city of Miami, but that is what I see happening.
Questions? Yes.
Not a question, a comment. It's the same comment I made on Saturday. Years ago, there were houses that were going to be demolished, and there were some people into historic preservation that wanted to save them, and they picked them up and moved them down and created College Square Village. So if you've ever been down to College Square, the majority of those houses were moved there from other parts of Dade County. And so I really hope that before this process goes too far, that the city tries to look and find a piece of land in the city, in West Grove, that they can possibly move some of these buildings and put them there and do the renovations to bring them back to current, standards. I mean, they could become little museums or whatever. But I would like to see the city try to find a piece of land and take the burden of moving these houses and paying the burden of restoring them, and on a piece of public land where everybody can enjoy the houses. And it would be a good example to the community of what could be done with these old houses.
Or making
Just
affordable
saying,
housing, affordable housing for the working.
Okay, next question, please. Yes, Dolly.
This isn't a question. I just want to say, one of the big problems with these hearings has been your concern about notice. I want to mention that our City of Miami preservation staff consists of 3 people. The City of Miami has at this time 6,000 historic buildings and 3 people to administer those buildings. If you go across to Coral Gables, where a population of 50,000 has a preservation staff of 5, that's 1 person for every 10,000 residents. If we applied that to go to City of Miami, our preservation staff would number 44. So I'd like to ask each of you who are concerned about this issue to contact your commissioner and your mayor and your city manager and tell them that we need more money in the budget for the historic preservation staff so they can do their job. Can you imagine, is there any one person in this room who would take on the responsibility of notifying the 51 homeowners?
Me, and I wanted to speak to that directly. I used to work for the city. I was the City of Miami Community Relations for the Omni CRA, and I was told by personnel, I'm not going to name the name, but a City of Miami employee, do not worry about contacting people. We want to move forward. You need to get on the game plan. I resigned on October 6th, and that was one of the reasons. There is a concentrated effort to not notify people when these type of workshops, summits, or engagement initiatives are taking place, depending on what the agenda ultimately is for the city. So I would love to take on that challenge. You'll have my number. I remember you from when working there. So I would love to be able to reach out personally. A lot of times I also ran for office back in November. I literally went door to door. I didn't have a mailer. I went door to door, meeting with families, meeting with people, and asking for their support in the candidacy of the office that I was running for. I distribute a community newsletter. I do it personally. I go door to door. I send emails, but I go door to door and I meet with families. I deliver it. I'm like a paper girl of the area. So I will take on that challenge.
That's their job.
I'm available
Let
to
them do
it.
their job.
All right,
That's
next
their
question,
job.
please.
You don't have to do it.
Yes.
That's
They're getting
their
paid
job.
big
It
bucks.
took me less than 2 hours yesterday to go through the 51 properties that the city didn't have time to when Ms. Elger back there asked if any of the homes were homesteaded, which was a really good question on Saturday. And the city didn't know, and somebody sent me the emailed me this list. It took me less than 2 hours to go through the property search and do the homesteading on these properties, and I semi-neatly wrote it on here, and then to type up what was another 19 homes that were missing from the list, and then I woke up this morning thinking about some other houses that came up in my head. So it can be done, there is a staff, and if they don't want to do it, there's tons of volunteers out there that want to help this community. I've spent hours and hours and hours doing this. This place is worth saving, but it has to be done right. The disrespect just keeps going on and on and on, and it just has to stop.
All right, next question. And again, let's try to stick to questions, please. Yes.
Thank you, Marty.
I know I spoke before, but I've been here since '74, and I started working as a conservationist in 1990. And I don't understand, since we're the oldest part of Miami was first settled here, we have historic properties that are preserved, but why we can't move forward to do more? I don't understand why that can't happen. I know, I appreciate the West Grove, I've lived here forever, but it's all over the Grove that we need this work done.
Any more questions?
Question.
Yes. Go ahead, Mr.
So, going forward then, if you will be notifying the 51 people, then is your intent then to discuss each one, a presentation like this to show them what it entails, and have a vote, or what's the process next?
The next process is we want community feedback. My business cards are on the desk, on the tables. Go ahead and start sending your letters of support or opposition, so that way we have them on file.
So, but is this a problem? I guess you can't make everyone happy all the time.
Of course.
So obviously we're not going to make everyone happy.
Of course.
But if the 51 stakeholders immediately affected, will they be able to have a vote at least and a majority?
Well, they can express if they want the property
Before any
designated or not.
decision is made, all those people will be notified and have a chance to have let's say if they want this to go forward or not. Okay?
That's my understanding.
Due process requires the owner to be notified, okay, and appear at the public hearings. The point about owner consent, I just want to respond to you because you brought it up, has been litigated various times. Okay, owner consent is not required because the courts have held that zoning by delegation. It's like saying to someone, how do you want your house zoned? But that's what due process and the public hearings are about, for people to speak up and say why they favor it or not, and that's a factor.
So if they want to speak up, they will be able to speak up to the HEP board and eventually go to a commission or something, or where does it go?
On appeal goes to commission.
On appeal goes to commission. So if they don't like it, they can try to appeal it also, then go to commission, which would be a more public forum.
Yes, well, the HEP board meetings are noticed as well. They're not, they're sunshine and noticed and there, then the commission, and if you still don't like that, you go to court. All right?
Yes.
I have a concern regarding the way it is designated house by house. What if you have a nice historical house there, but on each side there is a townhouse that's going to be built? Then you really, it doesn't make, I mean, it really doesn't match. It's going to be a problem, isn't it?
Well, again, do we want to preserve the structures, do we not?
Yeah, but the structure stands that, you know, there's a size to it, and on each side there's a townhouse, and it looks like.
It's an excellent question. Excellent question. In real estate, there is something that is called highest and best value. Charles Avenue has 74 houses, 11 empty lots, and 5 houses made out of wood. So you're going to have houses built in the 70s, wooden historic a structural and brand new buildings. It's a disaster.
Yes.
It's a disaster.
It's worked perfectly well in plenty of places throughout the world, blending the old with the new. Or works very successfully in most of the most successful cities throughout the world.
Yeah.
If you look at any city that has a long-standing legacy, even in this country, the old and the new can blend perfectly well if you have an architect who knows what he's doing and respects the code.
And it was done 50 years ago. I believe Buena Vista is a beautiful place to be. But compare Buena Vista with the West Road, it's a big responsibility. There's no content, there's no similar houses, there is no architecture relevant.
Are you an architect?
Yes, I am.
And you believe that you cannot successfully blend the old with the new?
I believe you can blend, but what I believe is the historic designation of those 51 houses and the new NCD2 and NCD revision is a debt certificate from the people who own property on the West Coast.
But I would still say you don't believe you can blend the old with the new successfully.
You can blend it, but who's going to pay for it? You going to pay, or me as the owner going to pay? I have to create a budget.
But if you as the owner choose to design something that is not compatible with the historic sites, then that's your decision and you're contributing to the problem.
That's what Miami 21 had to
Next
offer.
question? Yes.
In front of the commission.
You have to tell the buyer.
What if the buyer
Yeah, the seller does.
If the seller has knowledge, then it's his responsibility.
You have to tell the buyer what's going on.
You do have to tell the buyer.
No, I'm saying if a process has already started, a purchase.
You have to disclose it to the
You have
potential
to
buyer.
stop the sale from winning river?
No, legally, the broker has to disclose to the potential buyer that the house might be designated historic.
Even if, what if it's already under contract?
It doesn't matter, there's usually an inspection period. The buyer has a set time to do his inspections, do his due diligence. If that passes and he wasn't informed, but the broker has responsibility to disclose any prior knowledge of changes in the zoning or.
Question.
Yes.
Yes. To my concern or question,
Yes.
what can we expect your response to be and what we need as far as moratoriums on demolitions and zoning changes? Can we expect any response to that?
We don't work with zoning changes, that's,
Okay,
and that's
I know,
insidious.
but can you get the information to Mr. Garcia, since he's the head man over there, and let him know that our concerns still exist?
Okay. Yes.
So I just got a question. So people came to you all and said, listen, we're concerned about this or this. You've instituted this process. By instituting this process, you've started to train. You've got a train rolling down the track. And there really is no way for anybody here or any of the owners of any of these houses to really object to this, because everybody in this room could say, well, we object. And you say, well, we disagree because we've talked to people, whatever. And if you want to object, then you're going to have to go before the city commission, and then you're going to have to sue us, and then whatever. Correct? The train has actually left the track because you all are running the train. Am I correct?
No.
No? They can stop this right now?
Sure. Now.
Okay.
No.
How do you stop it?
You can voice, well, they're asking to voice the
No, let the city answer that question.
Yeah.
Let the city.
Yeah, how did they stop it?
I want to tell you that, I only address legal issues because we're not involved, or at least I am not involved in policy or politics. So legally, this is a workshop. This is preliminary outreach to the community that is done before changes are made. But the legal train, if you will, occurs when there would be a notice of a preliminary evaluation. That's when the board would have, as referred to earlier, a period of time to think about it and say yes or no, ending in 120 days. So that, as I understood staff, has not occurred yet.
But who does that? The staff does that. None of these people in this room do that. They don't go to the historic board. It's the staff who would go to the historic board and say, we want to go down the road. Correct?
Wasn't staff instructed by Commissioner Russell?
Yes.
To move forward on this?
Yes.
Yeah, it's politics.
That's what
Oh, really? Commissioner Selfie Boy is behind this?
Yes, Commissioner, by the way, Commissioner Russell came on Saturday and offered $350,000 to help fix 51 houses. And I'm glad that you recorded this, because we were here on Saturday, we sit under a tree, and we discuss about budget, we discuss about CRA money. A lot of offers were made to this community. Not a single piece of paper was handed out. And commissioners show up and say, I have $350,000 to fix 51 houses. Do the math, it's $6,800 per house. And he came and he offered money from the CRA. Guess what? CRA is not approved. It's a very responsible approach to show money to people to make them make a decision, such important decision that is your house where you live.
Guillermo, I was there, that's not true.
That's
not true.
It is true.
That's not true.
Okay.
So what's your version?
What?
Tell us what you think is true.
He actually is endorsing this and trying to get this passed.
But what about the $350,000?
He said there was some money available to help this process. Nothing's been set in stone yet. There is some money available he's trying to get to help this process, to help people that don't have money to fix a problem.
He offered $350,000.
Before you got here, Marcelo.
He offered $350,000, and I'm going to tell you something else. He was proud that the house across the street, he was paying for the roof.
Yes.
Guess what? That house, it doesn't have a building permit. So the commissioner chooses to help people that they don't go through the system and pay the fees, the permit fees, and go through the system the right way. So it is the truth, whether you like it or not, it's the truth.
All right, quick question.
$300,000 in CBDG money is being used to work on 60 homes currently. And he said that when asked how we were going to do the 51 homes and any of this historic preservation, he said we're going to use the CRA money,
Which
we have not gotten approved.
Kate, you have a question?
I was just going to speak to what she just mentioned. For the last year, I've done outreach to families that need home repair, myself included on that list, to Rebuilding Together Miami, a reputable organization that has come to this community many times over the last 10 years. Finally, Rebuilding was funded, and the outreach and commissioner has expressed it. I don't know if everyone attended every meeting, but his goal was to help restore, repair 60 to 100 homes. Now, did he say that was going to be done all at one time? No, that was his goal. So whatever funds that have been allocated or provided to Rebuilding Together, they're starting with the veterans first. Some homes, and I know from my list of about 25 to 30 families, the list ranged from a roof to as minor as landscaping. So I know several years ago, the average per home was $20,000 to $30,000. So if one home needs $5,000 to landscape, then you take that money difference and apply to another. So I don't know if you're trying to say each home is gonna be $6,000, Mr. Delapaz. That wasn't discussed. There's money been allotted. I'm sure there is a plan, and there are homes that have been repaired, and there are homes that will be repaired. Now they're working on veterans.
Okay,
So,
One quick point to the
argument
attorney.
about what's been done, what hasn't been done, until we know the whole story, or we're engaged with that process. Also, it's unfair to say what will or will not happen. We are very supportive of the CRA. No, it has not been confirmed by the county commissioners. But if those funds are available or can be made available, and this community wants the help that it claims it wants, we need to be doing everything possible we can to make it happen. And not be so.
Okay.
One quick question to
disparaging.
the attorney here. When you talk about due process, in this whole endeavor, how can we talk about due process when the owners of these properties have not been contacted?
Well, I was simply telling you.
No, I'm just saying, you're a lawyer.
Right.
Due process starts with the property owner.
All I meant to point out, and I'm sorry if I wasn't articulate, was that 2 public hearings are required by the code to do anything about designations.
Granted.
That's all I meant.
But I agree with that, but the point is, due process would suggest that the owners be contacted first before anything else is done. Wouldn't that be reasonable?
I wouldn't want to be expressing a personal opinion,
Okay,
but
all right.
I understand your viewpoint. I understand your viewpoint.
Okay, any more questions? No comments, questions about historic preservation?
Have you looked into other areas that have had the same problem? I lived in Key West in the 80s, and they had the same exact issue. People were shutting down houses because developers were coming. And there must be other cities that have this issue. I mean, you go to Charleston, it's beautiful. Savannah, it's beautiful. They didn't build new buildings, they fixed old buildings. There must be some guide that we could follow that can help us get through this. You know?
I'm not familiar with any.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Right over here.
Yes.
She just asked a question that was already explained by Ms. Cooper. Coral Gables was designated as historic. And those houses over there look gorgeous. Okay? Walk across the street, go 1 block, make a right. There's some gorgeous houses, wooden frame houses. That's beautiful.
And they're tearing some down?
We can learn from them. There's a foundation for everything anywhere if you do your research and listen to other people when they talk. She just said, you know, a few issues they came across, a few. We can learn from what they did in Coral Gables.
Okay, any more questions?
Yes, what's on next? Your next step?
We're gonna have a meeting. We're working with the commissioner's office to establish a date, and we'll contact them. Okay, any more questions? Okay, thank you everybody for coming out.
Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Have a card or something?
Yeah, my name's Crespo. I'm gonna put it on my blog.
All right, write down this.
I want your name and your phone.